66 million years ago, an asteroid impact brought about the end of the dinosaur age. Yet, the biosphere demands an apex predator. After tens of millions of years of fierce competition, one group of mammals emerged, becoming the seemingly unshakable rulers of the Cenozoic era, carnivorans. The evolutionary tale of these animals will vividly illustrate a profound truth: kings must fall for the departed to survive. But the throne, oh, it's truly too enticing. While not all members of the carnivora order are strictly carnivorous, and not all carnivorous mammals belong to Carnivora, today, almost all large, non-hoofed predators and agile, smaller carnivorous animals are part of the vast carnivora family. However, 60 million years ago, placental mammals, eutherians, seemed to have no connection whatsoever to the term predator. The last time mammals ascended to the top of the food chain was an ancient tale from the Triassic period. With dinosaurs dethroned, it seemed utterly improbable that these scattered mice would get their turn. Yet, dreams must be held. The ancestral group of carnivorans, the Cimolesta, were among those dreamers. They were a group of arboreal animals resembling small, furry bundles. But this dream was dashed before it even began. After all, ecological niches are typically claimed by the swift. Millions of years before them, a host of mammals had already rapidly emerged across the globe, occupying the apex predator niche. These included the mesonychids, which resembled hoofed wolves, the creodonts, with their massive jaws, and the paleorictoids, resembling short-legged cats, among others. Each of them was an indiscriminate and direct killer, to the extent that their appearance even today seems quite gruesome, and they were undeniably formidable. However, they provided a basic blueprint for mammalian predators. Later, carnivorans would dominate the world with features like retractable claws for grip and attack, spring-like flexibility in their waists for efficient prey dispatch, powerful canines, and carnassial teeth for shearing large chunks of flesh. These traits were, to varying degrees, already evident in these early beasts. These adaptations were more than enough for them to reign supreme in the post-extinction wasteland. Although the body structure of the furry bundles and their close relatives might seem slightly more reasonable to us today, for a short period, they had no choice but to develop cautiously and avoid taking risks. 55.5 million years ago, Earth experienced the Paleocene thermal maximum, PETM. A rapid and extreme global warming event. The world suddenly became lush with forests and dense river networks. Both large herbivorous animals, such as the pantodonts and uintatheres, and smaller animals like the creodonts, as well as fish in the water, all flourished. Though the Cimolesta also benefited from this windfall, at least they significantly developed and expanded, temporarily escaping the threat of extinction. However, in nature, the victor eats meat and the vanquished become prey. The greatest benefits surely went to the dominant predators. Soon, among those early mammalian predatory pioneers, giant beasts like the half-ton hyenodons evolved, truly living up to the name beast. At the same time, their ecological niches continuously expanded, leading to the emergence of opportunists like Andrewsarchus and the towering Arctocyan. As for an ancient mammalian ability, dormant for 200 million years, the saber-toothed killing style, it experienced a renaissance. Saber-tooth-like animals, about the size of a medium dog, used this very technique to pierce the throats of prey much larger than themselves. Yet, the other side of the throne is an endless challenge. The warm climate also brought a formidable competitor to mammals, birds of prey. After every major extinction event, these avian predators would re-emerge, asserting their dominance. Examples include Gastornis, Phorus rhacos, and Kelenkin, among many others. Birds of prey, with their sharp talons and beaks, inherited from the Triassic period, possess terrifying bite forces and internal bone structures that inflict high damage while also providing powerful attacks. Some of them even partially regained bipedal locomotion, walking upright. Unfortunately, even with such clear indications, this did not break the ancestral curse of the birds of prey. Around this time, the Indian plate continuously pressed northward into the East Asian plate. Chains of mountains dramatically rose from the seabed, forming the precursors of today's Himalayan mountain range and the Tibetan plateau. Gradually, enormous amounts of rock were exposed on the surface. The humid sea breezes from the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum then laid down a dense network of waterways within these mountains. Atmospheric carbon dioxide, dissolved in water, would react with calcium-bearing minerals in the rocks to form carbonate precipitates. Consequently, the temperature curve began to show a turning point. Finally, approximately 33 million years ago, atmospheric carbon dioxide dropped below a critical threshold. Temperatures plummeted, and Earth entered a white season of dramatic cooling. Just like that, the early birds of prey were yet again wiped out. The struggle for dominance between mammalian and avian predators ultimately failed to become the main theme of the Cenozoic era. However, this was certainly not good news for those early mammalian predators either. Those at the top of the food chain would inevitably be the primary victims of this change. Tens of millions of years of warm weather had made them too accustomed to ambushing slow-moving prey in forests and wetlands. But the cold snap destroyed the forests, leading to the spread of grasslands across the earth. The leaves of grass, or poaceae plants, are rough. Herbivores accustomed to tender leaves could neither chew nor digest them. Early large herbivores swiftly perished, an event known as the Eocene-Oligocene extinction event. The world, however, has no need for hunters without prey. From then on, the fortunes of these early mammalian predators took a sharp downturn. Yet, their former subordinates seized the opportunity in this power vacuum. Their restricted living space had forced them early on to target harder-to-catch prey. This ultimately prompted a complete physical overhaul approximately 42 million years ago. Marking the true emergence of the carnivora onto the historical stage, did carnivorans have superior stats compared to older generations like the creodonts? Not necessarily, but they were certainly better suited to hunting the new prey of the grasslands. On the grasslands of the Oligocene, 30 million years ago, a new generation of herbivores, the true grazers, represented by various horses, camels, and rhinoceroses, became the dominant life forms. The more developed brains and agile bodies of carnivorans allowed them to fully exploit the extremely limited cover on the open grasslands. They would stealthily approach, then, seizing the brief moment when grazers lowered their heads to eat, they would spring out like an arrow from a bow. Finally, within 100 meters, they would use extreme speed to overcome their prey's own speed, delivering a fatal blow in a flash of lightning. For animals at the bottom of the food chain, even failure offers the hope of finding a marginal ecological niche to survive. But for an apex predator's niche, it is absolutely a power struggle where two tigers cannot share one mountain. This struggle has no losers, only winners and the dead. Soon, the mesonychids and paleorictoids became completely extinct. Only the creodonts managed to endure a struggle. After losing nearly all their territory in the northern hemisphere, they retreated to Africa, and for a time, even attempted a comeback. However, they never managed to reclaim their throne, finally disappearing into the lower ranks of the food chain just over 10 million years ago. The internal competition for the throne never ceases. The newly risen carnivorans immediately began a fierce, internecine battle. From the very beginning, two equally formidable carnivoran groups emerged simultaneously, the feliforms, likely originating in Asia, and the caniforms, which arose in North America. They declared the two great suborders of carnivora, Feliformia, cat-like carnivorans, and Caniformia, dog-like carnivorans, were now sworn enemies. A cat-dog war spanning over 30 million years thus began. At that time, the bodies of early feliforms, specifically the nimravids, often called false saber-toothed cats, already possessed some of the characteristics of today's large felines. More critically, they had independently evolved saber teeth yet again. Caniforms, as their name suggests, resembled dogs but were often much larger, and had bear-like physiques but were generally swifter than bears. It seemed evident that the saber-toothed feliforms, compared to the more versatile caniforms, were the prime contenders for the throne. Do you dare contend with me, who wield saber teeth? But they did not know that to wear the crown, one must bear its weight. Approximately 23 million years ago, the cold climate of the Oligocene suddenly ended. large animals were severely impacted, and the feliforms, which relied more heavily on large prey, met a similar fate to the creodonts, retreating dismally to Africa. In contrast, the caniforms, which retained some omnivorous capabilities, remained as steady as an old dog. Round 1 of the cat-dog war, caniforms win decisively. As victors, the caniforms not only enjoyed nearly 9 million years of unchallenged dominance, but the entire Caniformia suborder also seemed to benefit from their success. The caniforms had 2 close relatives who seemed to have inherited their speed and strength respectively. Roughly speaking, one became increasingly dog-like, and the other increasingly bear-like. These 2 caniform relatives would later evolve into the next generation of top-tier predators within the caniform suborder. We'll set that aside for a moment. During this period, some smaller predators also emerged within the North American caniforms, resembling modern-day otters. They set their sights on the increasing fish populations in northeastern North America. Since whales weren't yet well adapted to cold waters at the time, and the recent Eocene-Oligocene extinction event had wiped out amphibian cetaceans, the caniforms seized a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They went to sea. Their descendants evolved into today's seals, sea lions, walruses, and other pinnipeds. Despite venturing into the ocean so late, it was no longer possible for them to directly challenge the gods like whales and newly evolved sharks. However, they firmly established themselves as the ocean's second-tier predators and large amphibious predators, enacting a remarkable tale of adaptation in mammalian evolutionary history. Yet, the rising fortunes of the caniforms couldn't overcome the curse of the throne. Although the caniforms, particularly the amphicyonids, bear dogs, were highly successful during the Oligocene, currents of change were stirring beneath their imperial shadow. The body types and running gaits of horses and even-toed ungulates were continuously optimizing, while rhinoceroses and elephants grew ever larger. To maintain their advantage in the evolutionary arms race between predator and prey, the caniforms at the top of the food chain could only continue to become larger and more specialized. When history begins its downward slope, someone always hits the gas. Approximately 18 million years ago, the amphicyanid family suddenly plunged into internal strife. A bear dog from Europe invaded North America. This particular bear dog was the most radical in its family, obsessed with becoming larger and stronger. This not only meant higher hunting efficiency but also that they could directly snatch food from their North American relatives. In a mere 1 million years, this European bear dog single-handedly wiped out the most diverse native North American bear dog species. From then on, becoming bigger, faster, and stronger became almost the sole pursuit for the vast majority of bear dog family members. By 15 million years ago, the bear dog family had produced predators even larger than today's polar bears. For anyone familiar with competitive gaming, this storyline of pushing for bigger stats is incredibly familiar. Around 14.5 million years ago, Earth suddenly experienced a small-scale extinction event with complex causes, known as the Mid-Miocene disruption. This extinction event wasn't massive, affecting only about 30% of mammal species. However, the bear dogs, whose diversity had already essentially collapsed, couldn't even withstand this level of upheaval. Their populations crashed, and most of the apex predator bear dogs went extinct, leaving only a few lineages with higher omnivorous tendencies barely clinging to survival. Thus, the Carnivora order once again entered a chaotic period of intense competition. This was exactly what they had been waiting for. The feliforms, who had been offline in Africa for over 10 million years, returned at this very moment, bringing their ancestral saber teeth with them. They swept through with unstoppable force, moving from Africa to Europe, then from Europe to Asia, and finally crossing the Bering Strait to invade North America, the caniform stronghold. Not only that, the feliforms completely upgraded their own capabilities. They enhanced their saber teeth while also emulating the powerful, bulky physiques of the bear dogs, evolving into the ultimate form of the saber-toothed cat, the enhanced Barborophelus-like saber-tooths. These were clearly prepared for battle, but little did they know, the caniform suborder was even more prepared. Even during the peak of the bear dog empire, a group of formidable contenders within the caniform suborder challenged their dominant older brothers. These were the Hemicyanini, marking the rise of what we might consider modern bears. However, the Hemicyanini were nothing like typical bears. Instead, they resembled enlarged, plus-sized wolves, with slender limbs and flexible bodies. They were, in essence, an improved version of the bear dogs. The bear dogs, in their perceived immense strength, simply couldn't compare to the Hemicyanini. Not only did the Hemicyanini fail to single-handedly solo the caniform suborder, but they quickly became minor players, relegated to the sidelines. Though they stubbornly sought opportunities to reclaim the throne again and again, they ultimately went extinct after a final, desperate gamble over 5 million years ago. But that's a story for later. However, the Hemicyanini within the caniform suborder didn't fare much better. Their adaptations, specifically tailored to challenge the bear dogs, also subjected them to the same throne curse that had caused the bear dogs to falter. The mid-Miocene disruption severely impacted them as well, leading to the complete extinction of the Hemicyanini around 5.3 million years ago, even earlier than their bear dog big brothers whom they had pursued their entire lives. It seems that, having learned from this experience, the Ursidae, bear family, fully transitioned into the ranks of omnivores after the Hemicyanini. The earliest to make this shift were likely the Indarctos, bear dogs, which also originated in Eurasia. They probably evolved from smaller, tree-climbing bear ancestors, thus possessing a sixth digit that aided in grasping. However, overall, Indarctos and its close relatives, both in their physique and lifestyle, were quite similar to today's brown bears, being anything but picky eaters. But it seems they were almost too laid back. One of Indarctos's close relatives, living in East Asia, almost completely transitioned into a herbivore, even making bamboo its main food source. This was Ailuropida microta, the ancestor of today's giant panda, incidentally, a less common pure herbivore among the rodents. The bamboo rat also fell in love with bamboo around the same time. Generally, bamboo rats prefer older bamboo, while giant pandas favor tender bamboo. Bamboo rats occasionally supplement their diet with other grasses, while giant pandas occasionally supplement theirs by eating bamboo rats. Well, it seems our national treasure still remembers it belongs to the carnivora order, while some members of the Ursidae family, like the giant short-faced bear and the polar bear, later showed a tendency to re-enter the niche of apex predators. The new mainstream of omnivorous bears largely remained unshaken. Like the increasingly omnivorous later bear dogs, they became the retired veterans of the caniform suborder. The caniform suborder was suddenly leaderless, and the crown teetered precariously. It was at this moment that the feliform suborder, seemingly dormant, suddenly made its move. For over 10 million years, the feliforms had been suppressed by the caniforms, producing only one notable group, the Nimravidae, false saber-toothed cats, which ultimately failed to secure dominance. Although individual lineages like the Percrocutidae and Hyenidae, early hyenas, did emerge, with many possessing large bodies and incredibly powerful bite forces, dubbed bone-crushing predators. These animals ultimately couldn't resist resorting to sneak attacks and stealing other animals' ready-killed prey. Some even devolved into living nutcrackers, content to scavenge and crunch bones that other animals couldn't eat, just for the marrow. For tens of millions of years, most feliform families were limited to scrounging and causing trouble within smaller predatory ecological niches. For instance, there were the mongoose-like carnivorans, which, despite having zero venom resistance, dared to confront snakes head-on because all their attributes were allocated to agility. However, one feliform lineage found its uniquely correct path to greatness, the Felidae, or true cats. The Felidae had already developed a nearly liquid-like, flexible body to penetrate the narrow caves where small animals hid. Furthermore, they evolved retractable claws. To draw a human analogy, this is like having fingers that can bend backward, allowing the claws to be sheathed. This not only prevented claw wear but also allowed them to run silently. As if to truly commit to conquering the apex predator throne, they even lost their sweet taste receptors, completely severing their dietary ties with plants. Around 16 million years ago, a member of the Felidae family sounded the charge against the caniform suborder. As if to fulfill destiny, they also evolved the iconic feature of their predecessors who once vied for dominance with the bear dogs, saber-toothed. With this, the Feliforms, and indeed the entire carnivora order, witnessed the arrival of the ultimate killing machine, the saber-toothed cats. Watch closely, Nimrovids, they seem to say. This is how you use the power of the saber-tooth. Saber-toothed cats were a perfect combination of speed and assassination. They were an unstoppable torrent of claw and fang, leaving large animals worldwide, and even early hominids, trembling in terror beneath their formidable saber teeth. Even more audacious, a saber-toothed cat named Homotherium, or the scimitar-toothed cat, directly unleashed its most powerful version, the Smilodon, saber-toothed tiger, right in the caniform stronghold of the Americas, practically shouting, "Be destroyed, you dog-like creatures." With a size approaching half a ton, they inherited the title of the largest cat species to ever live, and with their extraordinarily long saber teeth, they perfected the art of saber-toothed predation. He caniforms declared, "This cannot stand." And so, the Canidae, dog family, stepped forward, taking up the mantle of countering the cat invasion and restoring dog supremacy. Though the Canidae are one of the oldest families within the caniform suborder, for nearly 30 million years, they seem to be AFK at the spawn point. Their body size was not large, and their living range never extended beyond the Americas. But starting over 7 million years ago, the Canidae suddenly leapt out of their comfort zone, left the Americas, and embarked on a global journey. Over the next few million years, they rapidly evolved into larger predators like wolves. By the eve of Homo sapiens' exodus from Africa, over 100,000 years ago, not only had formidable species like dire wolves evolved in North America, but various members of the Canidae had also spread across the entire world, excluding Australia and Antarctica. But don't forget the cost of kingship. Just as the saber-toothed cats were charging forward triumphantly, they suddenly faced a backyard fire. In Africa, over 3 million years ago, a felid named Dinofelis suddenly, along with other large felines, launched a challenge. These new generation cats had no saber teeth, and thus, no restrictions imposed by them. While not as specialized, they were less picky about their prey. In the subsequent waves of climate change, the saber-toothed cats, always at the pinnacle, were invariably the first to suffer from the perils of high places. In contrast, the new generation of felids continually seized the opportunity to usurp the saber-toothed cat's territory, pursuing them all the way into the Americas. By 100,000 years ago, the family of saber-toothed cats, even after producing the strongest Smilodon, had become a lineage whose diversity was almost entirely depleted. The past destruction of previous kings repeated itself upon them, but none of this mattered anymore. Because Earth was soon to enter the Quaternary glaciation, and strictly speaking, we are still in its aftermath even now. The cold winds decimated large terrestrial animals, not to mention the ultimate harvest by Homo sapiens. Whether it was saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, short-faced bears, or cave lions, their prey no longer existed in this new era. Earth had entered a new era called humanity, yet, the cat-dog war did not cease. People often ask me, what do you think is the most evolutionarily successful creature? For the future, I cannot say. But in the present, I believe this crown perhaps belongs to our domesticated felines and canines. Through long periods of domestication, the meows of cats have become increasingly like a baby's cry. Dogs have learned eye contact, coupled with their adorable appearance. This is almost a perfect exploitation of the underlying bugs in the human brain, making them undoubtedly one of the most dominant animals in human society, but at the same time, their wild ancestors still thrive. And they themselves have never forgotten their survival skills in the wild. You might think they are mere playthings under your control, but perhaps in their hearts, we, these two-legged creatures, and the world we have created, are merely a new stage for their ongoing conflict. These descendants of kings understand best that kings always fall. When humanity perishes, these cats and dogs will continue to multiply and thrive in the wasteland, in a different way, writing the next chapter of their 40-million-year cat-dog war. Today's video ends here. Thank you for watching the whole video, and don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and leave comments to give me feedback. Thank you all.